Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar for today called Parenting During Uncertain Times, How to Feel Confident in the Decisions That You Make. My name is Cynthia Robinson, and I am the Child and Youth Mental Health Coordinator with the Hamilton Family Health Team. We also have joining us Kiara Clark, who is one of my colleagues who will be monitoring any of the questions that you submit via the chat function of the Zoom meeting. So yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them in along the journey of us going through this webinar. I very much value open communication throughout presentations, and so don't feel as though you have to hold your questions to the end. Kiara will just interrupt me and say we have a question. So let's get started. So this presentation is on making decisions. What is decision making? It's the selection of a belief or a course of action among several possible options, and these options are based on an informed process of evaluating our values, our preferences, and the understanding of the decision maker related to the information at hand in the context. We all make decisions every day, especially in our role as caregivers. It's something that happens all the time. Some of the decisions that we make are relatively simple. You know, how do I keep my child safe when they're online or at school? What is the best way to manage this issue when my children are having a disagreement or a conflict with one another? And what are one that actually my husband and I are working through right now is exploring what are the appropriate chores for my child at his or her age and stage, and are they doing enough or are they doing too much? Trying to have a happy balance of the different things that we have as expectations for them. Sometimes the decisions that we make are more difficult than the typical day-to-day ones. And these can be such things as, you know, where do we send our kid to school? Do we send them to public, Catholic, French immersion, private? How should we arrange custody and access post-separation? Am I making the right parenting choices when I'm taking care of situations with my kids? And how involved do I become in my child's interpersonal issues? Like, when do I go in to support them? And when do I, back off? So when do I know when to support my kids, and when do I know when an appropriate time is to back off? Okay, wait, this is different though. We are now all of a sudden being faced with many decisions that we have to make on a day-to-day basis that we haven't had to deal with before. There's a pandemic going on, Cynthia. And so when we're, as caregivers, trying to make decisions for our children and for our family, a whole lot more needs to be considered when we're thinking about that. We've heard time and time again that we are in a period of unprecedented times that is very out of the norm. It's very unique. It's very different than our normal. Our human brain relies on previous experiences to make decisions. It's how we survived and thrived as a species. But this current climate that we're in is completely new for most of us, and we don't have a lot to base our decisions on. We don't have a historical context to be able to say, oh, this is how I handled something similar to this in the past. This is very different. Humans like predictability, and we like a sense of certainty. And unfortunately, in this climate that we're in today, both of those things are not what we're really fully experiencing. All of a sudden, even the most benign decisions that we have to make carry a lot more weight to them. Should I get a haircut? Should I go to grocery store A, where I know it's less busy and maybe people seem to be socially distanced, physically distancing more? Or do I go to grocery store B where it might be more busy, but I know that everything I need is going to be there? Who should we include in our bubble? What PPE what personal protective equipment should I be wearing? And how much do I fight my child to have him or her wear it as well? And is it safe to visit our vulnerable family members now? All of these decisions, all of a sudden, did you ever think deciding whether or not you should get a haircut or which grocery store you would go to would have such importance to it as it has in our day today? And this becomes even more difficult when we're thinking about our children. What do we do about childcare? What about school? And, you know, what's it going to look like? And will I send my kid to school? And do I even have a choice based on the circumstances of what my life is right now? Maybe I don't have a choice. Maybe I have to send them to school, and trying to come to terms with that. Now all of a sudden deciding if it's okay to have a play date to let your kid go play with their friends or not, that has a lot more importance to it. Is it safe to take my child out to go grocery shopping or to do errands? There's something that I noticed actually at the beginning of the pandemic in particular, seeing caregivers walking in the grocery store with their child in their cart, and actually noticing what I perceived as the judgmental looks from other people about the fact that their child is there. You know, we don't really know the situation of what that family is in. Maybe it's a single parent who doesn't have anyone to care for their child, so they had to bring their child. But, you know, making these decisions has become a very much more complicated process for us. And then the last one here is another example of how do I help my child manage his or her mental health and big emotions related to the pandemic. All of these things is a multi-layered kind of scenario right now. There's a lot of things going on for us. And it can cause us to experience a sense of analysis paralysis. So what is analysis paralysis? Well, it's when we start to overthink or we try to extract some sort of certainty from something that remains uncertain. When we become overwhelmed and bombarded by the what ifs, they cause us to feel unable to make a decision. If we think about the what ifs, there's always going to be another what if. When we're trying to obtain an unrealistic sense of perfection, everything has to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and everything has to be very clear and linear in order for me to feel like I need to make a decision. In times such as this, that is not a luxury that we really have. Okay, so now what? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to approach this now? Well, there's always a start. And I think I'm going to be reviewing some things now that you all do anyways. This will just hopefully provide a bit of structure and a bit of a framework to kind of work from. The first thing is knowledge is power. So educate yourself by accessing reliable sources of information. Websites such as Public Health, the Ontario government, school board websites for school-specific information, the WHO organization, these are all much better sources to be accessing information than relying solely on things like social media or even the news media coverage, which can be sensationalistic sometimes and may have a bit of a lenience towards one perspective or the other, one side or the other. But then also, we have to engage in meaningful self-reflection. What are your values? What are your needs? How does your personal situation impact the greater context in which this pandemic creates? We need to trust the experts and figure out how this information fits with our personal experience and our practical life needs. And there's a way that we can do that, a very structured way, starting with a decision-making framework. This is a 7-step framework that you can use to practically think through bigger decisions that we make. And again, I think that for the most part, we do this naturally, but when facing a really big decision or a decision that has a lot of weight to it, or the implications of that decision can be bigger, using a framework like this can really help to pull yourself out of the emotional response and the emotional mind to the decision, and help you to think more clearly about what the appropriate response will be. So the 7 steps: you identify the decision that needs to be made. You research and understand the context in which that decision exists. You know your options. You evaluate them. You pick one, you take action, and then you review. Don't worry, we're going to explain this a bit more on the next slide, and then the following slide to that is going to have a practical example. So, what do we mean by these steps? Identify. You clearly identify the nature of the decision that you need to make, while also assessing what are your needs, values, and expectations for that. Then you research. You collect the pertinent information before you make your decision through using reliable sources of information that we talked about in the previous slides. Some of this process is, as I said before, internal, which is knowing your values and your needs, and some of it is external. It's gathering that data and the information from books, online, people, websites, all of that kind of stuff. Then knowing what your options are. As you collect this information in step 2, then you identify several possible paths or choices and options that you might take. In this step, you list all of the possible options, even if they don't seem very appealing at first. So if you think about this step as the brainstorming session, where you come up with all of the possible options that you might choose, and you really, if it's an option, you don't say, oh no, I don't want to do that one, because you really, if you exclude certain options, you might exclude an ultimate decision that you would have otherwise made if you had gone through this process. So after you've identified the options, that's when you evaluate them. You draw on the information that you've found, both the external and internal, to evaluate each of the options above, such as using a pros and cons list for each option. You identify what are the pros to the situation, what are the cons to this situation. And going through this process oftentimes identifies one or more preferable options. There, like you'll notice that there are a couple, one or two that you're like, I seem to, these ones seem to resonate with me more. These ones seem to attract me more. And that can be helpful because it helps you to feel more confident in the choice that you may eventually make. If you're still unclear though, after going through the pros and cons option list for each of the options, and one of them doesn't really stick out for you, try to put them in order of preference from, the most preferable to the least preferable, because that might be able to bring the subconscious kind of biases or perspectives on each of the options so that you can better make a choice. Once you have done that, hopefully you've come to a point where you feel confident in selecting an option that best fits considering all of the criteria that are important to you. Again, so that's the internal, your values, your needs, your expectations, but also the external. What does the data say? What does with regards to the pandemic, what are the risks and benefits to this choice? And then you're picking that option, and the next step is you take action. That's when you implement the choice that you've chosen. I have, as Nike slogan says, just do it. Following that, that's when you review it. You consider the results of your decision and evaluate whether or not it has resolved the needs, the values, expectations that you identified in the first step. And if the decision has met these needs, has not met these needs, then you may want to try one of the other options that you explored, or going through this process and actually trying one of the options out, it may have even identified another option that you hadn't explored initially. So how do we do this practically? How do we incorporate this into our actual experience? So let's try it out. Let's say your daughter plays baseball on a baseball league, and all of a sudden there's the option now of, participation with her league. The decision to be made is, should I let our daughter play with her league? I'm going to research now This is where I'm going to research what is the plan that the league has for this. How are they going to ensure safety? What are they going to do to respond to and respect the measures set out by public health, by the medical experts related to COVID-19? How are they going to make this a safe option? Then I'm going to go on to the internet, or I'm going to look at the public health website. I'm going to understand from the Ontario government their recommendations with regards to the phase that we're in and the numbers that we're seeing. And I'm going to try and really assess, what does the community say about this? What's the research out there? Like, is this a safe option, or is this something that I should steer away from? Then I'm going to explore, what are my values as a caregiver? What are my values around the physical health of my child, the mental health and well-being of my child, the values around social connection, the values around commitment to the team, and not letting the team down or whatever, things like that. I'm going to explore all of those things, and those will hopefully help me to come up with some different options. And I've come up with 3 different options that I thought were the most logical. I'm sure that if you were working through this on your own, you would come up with many more. But for ease of explaining this framework, let's just assume that we have the 3. Option A, she plays following the physical distancing and health measures recommended by public health and the league. So option A is we allow her to play. Option B is we don't allow her to play. Maybe she has physical considerations that make us feel that we can't let her do that. Maybe she's immunocompromised or something. So we allow, but we really want to make her involved with the team. We really want to help her to understand responsibility. We really want to make sure that she doesn't let her team down and all of those things. So maybe in order to adhere to the values that we have, we allow her to support her team from a distance. That means she's attending the games and she's cheering them on, but we cannot let her play the game. And then the third option is we've decided that it's too much of a risk. It's not something that we can do for our family. And so we keep her home and wait for a vaccine or until we feel safer to allow her to participate. So the next step, you come up with a pros and a cons list for each of the alternatives above. I didn't actually go through that process because I think that that's a pretty self-explanatory. You would come up with the option. So option A, she plays following physical distancing and health measures recommended by public health and the league. You come up with what are the pros of this option, what are the cons of this option to better help you assess the overall value of whether that fits with what you would want to do or not. And then you see how that fits in with your needs, your values, and your expectations. Once you've done that, once you've assessed each of those options, then you choose and you commit to one. Then you try it out. And then, as we talked about in the slide before, you evaluate and decide if you want to continue as is or if another option should be explored. And if another option is explored, that maybe wasn't part of the A, B, or C options that you initially had, then you can just go back to the 3rd and 4th steps to be able to further unpack those options so that you can feel confident in the decision that you're making. So that is a basic decision-making framework which can help to plan out and think both logically and rationally about the decision that needs to be made. It allows you to really consider multiple scenarios, multiple options that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have considered if you just instinctively made the decision in your head. It can be one of the things that I think is really fantastic about implementing this type of a strategy is it allows for you to involve other people to a greater degree as well. Your partner, if you have a partner, can work through this with you. If your child is at an age and a stage that is developmentally appropriate, you can work through this with your child, and allowing your child to contribute to each of the steps, their thoughts and their ideas. That can not only help model for them how to make decisions in a effective way, but it can also involve them in the decision-making process, which is really an important thing to do. It helps them to have a say. It helps them to be able to understand and accept the decision that's being made. If the decision is that you're going to keep your child home and not allow them to play, and you know that that would be a really difficult decision for your child to accept, having them go through this framework with you might help them to be a bit more open to accepting that that is the decision that's being made. So there's multiple reasons why that following this kind of a framework when you have big decisions to make can be helpful. There's more to just using a decision-making framework though when we're trying to make choices in a climate such as this, when there's so much uncertainty and so much what ifs and unknowns, and there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of worrying that's going on in our society right now. So how do we bring ourselves to a place where we're better able to work from a point of confidence and calm, as opposed to reactivity and stress and worry? Let's look at some of those ways that we can do that. There are multiple different ways that we can do that, but I've chosen three areas to focus on for this presentation. The first is radical acceptance. I'm going to talk about each of these in the following slides. The second is mindfulness and meditation, and then the third is self-care. So what is radical acceptance? Radical acceptance is a term that comes out of a therapeutic intervention called dialectical behavioral therapy. Dialectical behavioral therapy is a therapeutic intervention that has been developed to help with multiple different challenges for people, one of which is emotion regulation. Emotion regulation is being able to calm your emotional responses so that you're better able to think clearly and to react in ways that are more effective in given situations. Radical acceptance, as defined, is a complete and total acceptance of reality for what it is. It doesn't mean that you endorse the reality. It doesn't mean that you say that you're happy about it. Like, nobody's going to say right now, oh, the pandemic is amazing and I'm really glad that it happened, right? But what it does mean is you acknowledge it for what it is, and it's like you're calling a spade a spade. So you're acknowledging that the reality is what it is, and that's all that it is. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because that's not super clear. There are three parts to radical acceptance. As I said, you accept reality for what you accept reality for what it is. It is what it is. And the example for what we're in right now, you simply say to yourself, we are in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. You're accepting that that is going on. The second thing, you accept that the event causing you pain has a cause. Viruses exist. When a new one comes along, we need time to know how to respond to it, how to prevent it, how to work with it. This is just what the reality is. And then the third step, you accept that life can be worth living even with the painful events in it. Saying to yourself, this won't go on forever, and trying to recognize something positive to hold on to. And I know that this third step here can be challenging for all of us, but I think some people it's even more challenging. For those people who have a relatively, their lives have been relatively unaffected except for the inconveniences or the the changes that we have to take about physical distancing and stuff like that, this will be much easier for us for those people to respond to. When you have someone who's losing their family business, or when they've lost someone as a result of this pandemic, these are things that can be really hard. And so it's not to whitewash the situation, because I know that this can be a very challenging thing for us to do, and yet it's such an important thing to do, to try to hold on to something positive, because that gives you the power to continue on and to go on, to feel confident and to feel as though there's hope still. So how do we practice radical acceptance? There's a little bit of a discussion I need to have with this slide here. I think that the way that our brains react to situations when we're under stress, or when we're experiencing a really big emotion like anger or frustration or fear, our bodies go into what's called a sympathetic, our sympathetic nervous system is activated. The sympathetic nervous system is the part of our brains and our bodies that activates our body. It gets us going. It causes the fight or flight response. Our heart rate increases, our blood pressure rises, our digestion slows, it speeds up. We're just more agitated physically. And on top of that, our brain is releasing stress hormones and just different chemicals within our brain that is activating, it's getting us going. What we want in these situations is to try to bring that response down. We want to engage the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite to the sympathetic nervous system. It is a system that comes into play when we're feeling calm, when we're feeling like you're snuggling with your kid on the couch, or you're laying in bed and you're just feeling happy, or you're going for a walk in nature. And when things are going well, our parasympathetic nervous system is more activated, meaning our blood pressure decreases, our heart rate goes down, our digestion slows down. We become like, we're not sweating and nervous feeling. Cortisol drops in our brain, norepinephrine drops in our brain. Like there's a lot of different things that go on. So when you think about these two different states, the sympathetic nervous system is activated when you're high stress, when you're angry, when you're all these things, and you think about the way that your body responds in those situations physically, not inside, but the body language and your facial expressions, they are very different than when you're content and you're in a very happy space. You're not going to be smiling. You're not going to be relaxed in your body when you are in an agitated state. So these two strategies, willing hands and the half smile, are very small efforts to kind of tweak things that are going on internally, and to help send messages to your brain. Things aren't as bad as what it thinks that they are. So with willing hands, the way that you practice willing hands, and I invite you to try this as we're going through it, is you're sitting in your position, and you try to relax your body as much as possible. So when we're stressed, our shoulders seem to be up, and we're just like that. So if you can relax your shoulders down, you try to sense the relaxation in your arms, in your belly, in your legs. You just try to experience a greater sense of relaxation in your body, and actually literally hold your hands open as you see them in that picture. Having your hands open is a more of a willing, that's why it's called willing hands. It's more of a willing position as opposed to a closed off position like this. So when you're actually physically sitting in this position, it tricks your brain somewhat, because your brain's like, I can't be super stressed out if I'm sitting in such a relaxed and open position. Because when I'm stressed and angry or feeling those emotions, I tense up. But I'm not tense right now, so maybe this isn't as bad as what my brain is making me respond to it. The other quick strategy is called a half smile. Research shows that when we smile, it is a very strong connection to our brain, to releasing the feel-good chemicals, the calming response, and again, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, as opposed to keeping that sympathetic high stress situation going on. The picture of the lady is a bit more of a smile than a half smile, but it doesn't mean that you can't do like a full smile. It's just when you do a half smile, I'm going to try to get close, you just literally curl the corners up on your lips like this. And if you, I encourage you to try this out sometime. In fact, this has been one of the really great strategies that my 9-year-old has responded to. So my 9-year-old, I have a 9-year-old and a soon-to-be 4-year-old. They're great kids, but you know, when you have 2 little boys and one is less than half the age of the older one, a lot of conflict can sometimes come on. And little brothers can be really annoying. And I know this because I was a little sister, and I know that I really do things to annoy my older brothers sometimes. And so I'm trying to help my child, my oldest, to learn how to navigate that kind of, you know, rocky situation that can sometimes come up when he gets annoyed with his little brother, or when he gets angry with his little brother. And so I've actually gotten him to try this half smile thing, and he has said it really does work for him. And I've tried it myself. It doesn't make the situation, neither will the willing hand, completely better and make all of your anxiety, all of your stress, all of your anger, all of your big emotions go away, but it can help to kind of boost you enough to be able to allow you to approach it from a different perspective. So again, these 2 strategies are helpful because they send messages to your brain that it's, hey brain, it's not as bad as what you are making it out to be, even if it is as bad as what that is. And it helps to give you that boost to be able to approach it in a more effective way. Again, if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to send them in. Kiara is keeping an eye on that, and I welcome that. So let's look at mindfulness. Mindfulness and meditation is something that I think the Western society is starting to recognize. Well, for quite some time now, we've been recognizing it as effective and helpful as what I think it really is. It's unfortunate that it's taken us this long. There's so much research out there validating the use of mindfulness meditation and the effectiveness of how that, the effects that can have on our lives. Mindfulness is, as per John Kabat-Zinn, who is one of the leading people in our society around mindfulness, according to him, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. So what does that mean? It's really learning how to become an observer of your thoughts. It's like watching leaves float by in a river, with each of the leaves representing one of your thoughts or a feeling or sensation that's going on. But rather than becoming enmeshed or all consumed with those thoughts when they come, or those feelings or sensations, you become more of an observer, just watching and labeling them as they float by. This allows you to be mindful, maintaining your focus on the present moment, and not becoming overwhelmed with the thoughts. So one of the things that I thought early on about mindfulness is, in order to be good at mindfulness, you really have to be like a Buddhist monk. You have to segregate yourself from society and just completely become this full, like when I envision that when a Buddhist or someone who was really good at mindfulness, when they were meditating, that their mind was completely blank and that they were free of this burden that I seem to struggle with, of the thoughts coming in and the feelings and the itch on my nose and all of these things. And I have come, thankfully, to understand that that is not true. That when I am practicing mindfulness and my thoughts are racing, or I'm really struggling with that itch that's on the end of my nose, that I'm actually being a mindfulness rock star in that moment. I'm actually being very mindful, because mindfulness means you recognize when those thoughts or those feelings or those sensations come in. They don't just happen and you all of a sudden think, oh, 10 minutes down the road, I've created a whole grocery list and I didn't even realize that. When those thoughts come in and I recognize that they are coming, that is me being mindful. So if you ever do practice mindfulness, please don't allow the thoughts that are coming into your mind make you feel like you're not doing a good job of it, because you are. You're being very mindful in that moment. So let's talk a little bit more about mindfulness. How do you do it? On the left-hand side, we have 6 skills. And on the right, we have the benefits of mindfulness. Let's talk about the benefits of mindfulness first, because I think that that's really important to acknowledge. It's really interesting sometimes when you have young children, as people I'm sure most of you can relate to, they don't always sleep the best at night. And when they're really little, that really impacts your ability to sleep at night. And so sometimes when I'm at work, I'm feeling kind of sluggish and I'm feeling sleepy because I didn't have a good night's sleep at night. So what I've started doing is I actually engage in a mindfulness meditation practice in the moment, if I'm able to, and it really does seem to boost my energy. Mindfulness practice helps to improve sleep. It reduces chronic pain. There's a lot of literature out there on that. It improves heart function. It helps with digestive problems. It relieves stress. It reduces anxiety, improves your mood and your happiness. It boosts concentration and focus. It improves your self-esteem. There are so many valuable outcomes of engaging in a mindfulness meditation practice. So if you haven't done so yet, I really encourage you to think about it and to do some of your own research on it, because it will institute meaningful change. What we're finding is, and I'm sure that Eastern cultures have known this for much longer than us, but what we're finding is that when someone engages in mindfulness practice, it institutes permanent changes within the brain structure that if mindfulness meditation is done 10 to 15 minutes a day for a period of time, you will experience these improvements and you're not going to lose them. What it does is it creates new pathways in the brain, and it helps the brain to function in a more efficient manner. There's a lot of benefits to it. So let's talk a little bit about some of the strategies here to the left. Mindful breathing. How do you do mindful breathing? Well, it's both very simple and very complicated at the same time, because I think you really have to practice mindfulness in order for it to feel as though it's more simple. A good way to practice mindful breathing is either sitting in your chair or laying on your bed and just focusing on your breathing. When you're focusing on your breathing, you're focusing on the sensations of the physical impact of the breath. You're focusing on your belly moving and versus your chest. What we need to do when we're breathing deeply is breathing into our belly, so the belly is moving more than the chest, because that means you're breathing more efficiently down into the diaphragm. And when we're breathing deeply and we're mindfully breathing, not only are we figuring out how it's affecting our diaphragm or our chest, we're feeling the breath go into our nose, we're feeling it come out. When you breathe in through your nose, you'll notice that the air feels cool. Excuse me. When you're breathing out, the breath or the air is warmer. So you notice how it feels on your tips. Sometimes you can feel it here on your lip. Excuse me. That's a basic mindful breathing activity. I'm going to give you some resources to help you actually enact some of these skills, and they'll be on the next slide, but just talking about them briefly now. Mindful listening is one of my very favorite activities to do with my little boys. I love sitting out on the porch in the front of our house or in our backyard. We close down our eyes and we just listen. And it's so amazing, the sounds that you hear that were always there, but you didn't recognize them until you engage in that mindful listening. You can be sitting in a room that feels or seems as though it's very quiet. And when you engage in mindful listening, all of a sudden you hear all of these noises that, again, were just not recognized before you engage in that practice. And again, as with all of these activities, when you're engaging in them, you're focusing on the strategy, so mindful listening in this example, and then when the thoughts come in, because they will, because our brains are designed to think, and that's what they're supposed to do, so it's not a bad thing, but when those thoughts come in, you acknowledge them, and then you go back to what you're thinking of, or what the practice is. So I'm doing the mindful listening, and I'm hearing the birds, and I'm hearing the cars, and I'm hearing, you know, I don't know, a dog barking in the distance, and then I think to myself, I need to pick up bread because we're running low on bread. Then I acknowledge to myself, that is a thought. I acknowledge that thought, and then I go back to listening. And I think that this is a very important step, because I think unless we acknowledge a thought, they can continue on. If you think of your thoughts like a puppy dog or like a toddler, a little toddler who, when you're on the phone, because this is when it always seems to happen, you're on the phone having an important conversation, and then your 2 or your 3-year-old comes up and says, "Mommy." If you don't acknowledge the toddler, what's going to happen? Well, the toddler's going to do this, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, mommy," and get louder and louder and more insistent and more insistent. Whereas if you just take the time to acknowledge, "Mommy's on the phone, here's a toy, why don't you go play over there," acknowledge that your child, acknowledge the thought, then they can go away and be more quiet so that you can then refocus on what you're needing to do. Our thoughts are like toddlers. Mindful eating. What's mindful eating? Mindful eating is where we do the mindfulness around eating. If you have, try this one, because this is a very fun activity if you like chocolate. You get a piece of chocolate, you look at it, you look at the structure of it, you feel it, the texture of it, and how it gets a little bit softer the more you feel it and touch it. You smell it. You feel the feeling on your lips, you put it in your mouth, you let it melt a little bit, you experience the taste, the texture in your mouth, you chew it, you're just fully engaged in that moment, you're fully experiencing that experience. Mindful eating is really helpful, particularly for those times when we are wanting to maybe improve our diet in some ways. Have you ever opened up a bag of chips and eaten a couple of chips and then all of a sudden reached for the third chip and realized, "Oh my gosh, I ate the whole bag of chips"? That is the opposite of mindful eating. What was happening in that time was mindless eating. And what research is showing is that the more mindful we are when we're eating our food, the quicker we feel satiated or full, and then the less overeating that we participate in. Mindful walking, same kind of idea. You're walking, it's the same kind of thing as listening. You're listening and you're seeing and you're just fully immersed in that situation. The body scan is a really great one for sleep, when you're laying down in bed and you're just going from your toes to your head or from your head to your toes, and you're visiting every single part of your body to really experience the slowing down and the relaxation of those bodies. And observing the ordinary, it's similar to what I was talking about with the piece of chocolate. It's where you pick up something that's a pretty ordinary object like this pen, and you just fully experience it with all of your senses. So those are some ways to practice mindfulness. The next slide talks about some other ways to practice mindfulness. I don't want to go too in detail with this. You're going to get a copy of this presentation so that you can refer back to this page, but it just has 12 different ways that you can incorporate mindfulness into your day-to-day life. Guided meditation is something that I think is, it has really been a game changer for me and for my children. I think it's really helpful, particularly for those people who are embarking on a mindfulness practice in their life, where you may feel as though you need a little bit more guidance and more structure and more support around implementing mindfulness and meditation into your life. These are my go-to Well, the free ones are my go-to apps that we have used. And then the three at the bottom are very reputable, very well endorsed apps, but there is a charge for that, either monthly or year charge. Some of them are a bit more expensive than others. I believe Headspace is quite reasonable. I think that's the one that it was. So my go-to one is Insight Timer. I love it. It has up to, I think it's 30,000 meditations. Everything is free. You can pay a yearly fee that gains you access to some courses which are educational, and it also allows you to download and listen offline, but you really don't have to pay anything to be able to benefit from this meditation app. They're organized into different types of meditation, and there's also a really great kids section on that. Smiling Mind comes out of Australia. It is really great for kids and families. It's kind of like a family thing. Ninja Focus is one that my 9-year-old particularly endorses. Breathe, Think, and Do with Sesame is one that my 3-year-old would endorse. They both use those ones on a regular basis, and we've really found them to be quite good at what they, how they teach kids about mindfulness and meditation. So the third way that we can help ourselves to make better decisions is engaging in self-care. You gotta nourish to flourish. For those of us who have ever been on an airplane, I'm sure that you can recall when the flight attendants go to the front and they go through the safety process. When they talk about the thing dropping, the air source dropping from the front, from the top, they clearly say, if you are traveling with a minor or a child, you put the mask on yourself before the child. And that is because if the adult is not able to breathe and able to function, they're going to be completely useless to the child. And that is a great metaphor for our lives. If we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to take care of our children in the way that we would most like ourselves to take care of them. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to respond to situations and to be able to handle the upsets of life in the same way that we would if we were if we were attending to ourselves to a greater degree. So how do you engage in self-care? It's more than just pedicures and massages, although, as you can see, getting a massage is one of them. When I found in my daily life, the things that are most important to me, I think the top 3 on this list well, I guess there's maybe a top 4 on this list for me. The first is getting outdoors. Being in nature is a really important thing for me. There's a lot of research out there that shows that actually when you're in nature, you take on some of the, it's so beneficial to you that it can have a significant impact on the way that you're functioning. There's actually a type of therapy called forest bathing, where going out in nature, you're able to respond and to be nurtured and to experience the benefits of nature in a way that is more than just, oh, that was nice. So nature is really important for me. Getting lots of sleep is really important for me. If I don't have a lot of sleep, then I know I'm going to be more grumpy and I'm going to be more reactive and maybe saying things or in a tone or in a way that I otherwise would have been able to prevent myself from doing. Meditation has become a very important thing for me. I have to do that, and I love to do that. It's something that I never thought would become as important to me as it really has. And reducing the clutter. When my house is all cluttery, I know that I feel cluttered myself. So I think what's really great about reviewing self-care is not only to help reinforce that idea that if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be as able to approach the challenges in life in such an effective manner as if you were taking care of yourself. And if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of those in your care as efficiently and as effectively as you could if you were. But I think why this is really good as well is because it helps to give some ideas of other ways that we can do that self-care. The next slide talks about the different areas in our life that we really do need to consider when we're thinking about self-care. Again, it's not just pedicures and massages. There's physical things, emotional, social, spiritual, work, financial, space, and personal. I don't think that we always think about the financial aspects of our lives as a valid area for us to engage in some self-care. You know, doing the budgeting, doing the money management, actually paying bills on time, or establishing boundaries around our finances. These are all things that can be really helpful for helping to minimize the stress in our lives, which is self-care. The social things, the boundaries, and the with people who seem to not respect the boundaries that we feel are important, or, you know, taking a social media break every once in a while, because it can be so hard and heavy when we get consumed with this curated lifestyle of the people that we follow on social media, and, you know, can really it can really cause a lot of self-doubt and a lot of stress and anxiety sometimes. So taking a break from that. The spiritual aspect is not just churchy kind of stuff. There's a lot of things spiritual that are not related to God and church, or the different faiths and religions out there, although that also can be a very important aspect of self-care. Being out in nature and having a sacred space can be really important for our spiritual well-being. My little boy has a comfy corner in his room where he can go to when he's feeling particularly upset, mostly with his brother. But it just has become this beautiful space for him that he can just go and self-nurture when he needs to. And work, you know, having appropriate boundaries, a work-life balance, not working through your lunch, not working overtime unless it's something that is really important, like taking your breaks, and you know, having a positive relationship with your colleagues and your boss and stuff like that. These are all really important things for self-care. So let's recap. What has this presentation been about? I think that it's been about a lot of things. Recognizing the reality that we are in uncertain times, unprecedented times. It's a very unique experience that not many of us have ever experienced in our lives at all. I think it's really important to acknowledge that we all make decisions on a day-to-day basis, that you need to trust your skills and abilities to continue with confidence in your decision-making skills. Trust that you do a good job with this already, and you can incorporate some of the things that we've talked about to help you feel as though you're maybe being a bit more efficient, or being able to make these really challenging decisions in a way that will bring a greater sense of clarity for yourself. And in order to do that, some of the things that we talked about were the decision-making framework. You know, that can help to really unpack and sort through what the decisions are that you have set before you that you need to make. It can really help to bring it out of here, which can your mind can almost feel like an angry bee's nest, with all of the angry bees buzzing around, being the thoughts and the options and the possibilities and the what ifs. Bringing it out of there and putting it on paper to be able to help you to make a better decision that you can feel confident in. And then other skills that we talked about that will help to bring you to a mental, emotional state that you can feel confident in being able to make your decisions are radical acceptance, mindfulness meditation, and self-care. These are all things that if you think about a house, if the house is the decision the decisions that we make, in order to have a sound house, you have to have a solid foundation. Radical acceptance, mindfulness meditation, and self-care all help to reinforce that solid foundation within all of us. Now, stay tuned. We do have another presentation coming up if you're interested in attending. This presentation is called Calming the Commotion, Helping Your Child Prepare for a Whole New First Day of School. This presentation is really going to talk about how to help your child manage the anxiety of the what ifs and the unknowns. This presentation will also help you with giving you some ideas of ways that you can help calm your child, challenge the unhelpful thoughts that they might be having, and just helping them to be able to embark on this new whatever school is going to look like in September with a greater sense of calm, confidence, and ease. The presentation, I think it's actually August the 12th. Kira, can you just check that? I think I have a typo there. Yes, it is actually. It's not August the 10th. It's Wednesday, August the 12th. It will be at noon again. And as well as this presentation, we will be recording it. So if you're unable to attend at that time, you can always access our website to look at it at another time. I thank you all for coming, and I would just like to allow opportunity right now, if there are any questions, that you can take the time to send those into Kira, and I will respond to them.
Cynthia, I have had a few questions come in at the end.
Sure.
So the first question is, I like the idea of mindfulness to relieve stress, but it's so hard for me to turn my brain off. Any tips?
Yes, it's like I said, it's very challenging to quiet the monkey brain down that goes on in our mind. So I think the first thing is not to worry about that too much, because again, not being able to turn your brain off, of course you can't turn your brain off, because our brains are designed and they're supposed to generate thoughts. So that's okay. When you're trying to engage in the mindfulness meditation and your thoughts are going, feel great in that moment that you're being mindful, that you're recognizing when those thoughts come in. So the first thing is, don't beat yourself up about that, because that just means that your brain is working in the way that it's supposed to work. The other thing I think that can be really helpful with that is, again, the guided meditations. Using that guided meditation seems to provide a bit of a structure to allowing someone to feel as though they can benefit from that mindfulness practice to a greater degree than when you're doing it on your own. In order to engage in mindfulness on your own without the guided meditation, I would encourage you to try to do a mindfulness activity that really resonates with you. So again, when I was going through that list of the 6 different mindfulness activities, the mindful listening one is one that I just love. I love doing it. I love doing it with my boys. It's just something that I find is super easy to do, because I can close my eyes and it's almost like it's a game where I'm trying to find the different sounds that are going on. So trying to find a different mindfulness strategy, whereas for me, mindful eating is a very challenging thing, because when I put that chocolate in my mouth, I just want to swallow it. I just want to eat it and experience it. So yeah, finding, first of all, being gentle on yourself and acknowledging to yourself when those thoughts happen, that's because your brain is working and it's supposed to do that. And it's okay, because when you're noticing those thoughts, you are being a mindfulness superstar. The second is trying the guided meditations, because that can be really helpful. And then the third is trying a practice or a skill that can be really helpful. And recognizing you don't have to meditate for 30 minutes for it to be beneficial. One of the mindfulness practices that I do is with regards to my coffee. So I don't know, for those coffee drinkers out there, if you've ever noticed that the first cup of coffee always tastes better than any of the other ones. So I actually take that moment when I sip that coffee, like I engage in that mindful eating, I guess, drinking, just for that sip. So that probably is like 10 to 30 seconds long. And yet that still goes in the bank of benefit for me engaging in mindfulness. So that would be my response to that question. If I didn't answer, please let Kira know.
Okay, so the second question is, can I teach my kids mindfulness skills?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's crucial. I think it's such an important thing for us to try to do with our children. Again, that's where those apps are really great. So the Ninja Focus for older children, the Breathes, the Sesame Street one for the younger children. Those are really great apps. They're engaging for kids because they're app-based, and so they're really colorful and they're really interesting, and it's almost like a video game, but not really. So they're more likely to to enjoy it. Other ways that you can really help your child engage in mindfulness practice is by using the guided meditations on apps like Insight Timer. And it's something that I've done a lot with my older child at nighttime, laying down with him and just putting on one of those guided meditations for sleep. I think the best way that we can teach our children how to engage in mindfulness meditation is by doing, for them to see us incorporating that strategy, that skill into our own lives, and inviting them into that practice. There's a lot of different, like I said, the apps or different activities that you can do. There's a book called, oh my goodness, it's slipping my mind right now. It's about the frog. I'm very sorry, but there are a lot of books out there that you can use that can help you to incorporate different strategies with your kids. The mindful listening thing is a really great one. Yeah, so I think there's lots of websites out there, small things that you can do with your kids. And if you're able, if it's something that will fit with your family or that your family would respond to, you can even do mindfulness as a family activity. The Smiling Minds app through Australia is really family-based as well. Yeah.
Okay, so the last question I have is, how do I teach my kids radical acceptance without sounding invalidating?
Yes. Yeah. So I think that can feel as though it's a challenge. I think that in order to help your child to respond and hear that is to help them hear you engage in radical acceptance as well, and to not tell them, not to say, well, it is what it is and you're just gonna have to deal with it, is very different than saying, yeah, this pandemic is hard and we're in a very interesting time, and it's really frustrating to not be able to go and play with your friends and to do everything that you want to do. So you're validating them in that and acknowledging. Then the next step would be to say, and there's nothing we can do to make that different. So how can we manage this together? What are your ideas about what we can do to help you deal with this a bit better? And then helping them, I think, bringing them into the decision-making process, bringing them into the conversation where you're not telling them how to think, what to feel, how to do. You're asking them, what do they think about what they think? What do they think about what they should do, or how to feel in this certain situation? I think that helps them to feel as though they've got a greater sense of power and control in a situation where none of us feel like we have a lot of power and control. So I hope I answered your question. I think just to recap that, because I don't feel like it was very clear, is first, don't tell them what to think and what to feel. You can model that for them. You can say, yeah, you know, this is how I'm approaching it, and engaging them in a conversation, inviting them to ask questions and to say their yes buts and to share their disappointments and to be a part of the resolution of what the plan will be for moving forward. Are there any other questions, or does anybody want any further clarification for the questions that they've asked?
Nope, doesn't look like there's any more questions.
All right. Well, I thank you all for coming to the presentation today. I do hope that you have found it to be helpful. If you, like I said, you will have access to this presentation. It will be posted on the website, right, Kiara?
Yep, that's right.
So it will be posted on the website, and I hope to welcome you all back on Wednesday, August the 12th at noon for the next in the two-part series of our parenting webinars the pandemic. Thanks again for taking the time, and I wish you all the best.